Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We'll start with Mrs. Cusi for 6 minutes. Mrs. Cusi, Happy New Year. Please go ahead.
Happy New Year, Chair, and Happy New Year to all committee members who are here today, as well as those who are subbing in. For other committee members, it's a pleasure to have the Government Operations Committee in function once again, and congratulations to everyone on the committee for having it named the best committee in the House of Commons. That's a big achievement for everyone. Mr. Brennan, thank you very much for taking the opportunity to be here today. ArriveCAN has plagued this nation. This scandal, Mr. Brennan, is the touchstone of scandal, of a government that has become synonymous with scandal. I could go on and on about other scandals that we've seen, green slush fund, for example, the We charity scandal. And as a result of these scandals, so many individuals, including ministers, including former Liberal ministers, have been thrown under the bus. And this week, in fact, we've seen in the Globe and Mail two public servants have also been thrown under the bus by this Liberal government because we have Liberal ministers who are not willing to take responsibility for their oversight of the ArriveCAN scandal in this particular case, which you know has led to a CBSA RCMP investigation and which continues to plague not only former employees of CBSA, Public Safety Department, but individuals throughout the public service as to their willingness to speak up as to what they have seen, their communications with senior executives, and their communications with ministers, Mr. Brennan. The unfortunate thing is in our uncovering over the fall, the communication which got the most feedback, certainly for me and on my social media, related back to you and back to yourself. And that is your relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister's office. Now, I think that this is only one of many individuals who are implicated in this scandal, not to mention these two individuals which were able to skim $11 million for working in their basement and doing very little, as well as committing, frankly, crimes of fraudulent resume changing, perhaps even collusion. But we are here having you here today because we fundamentally want to get to the who at the highest levels. So my first question for you, Mr. Brennan, and you have began some of this in your testimony. Thank you for doing that. How many executives would you say you personally know in the Canadian Public Service?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions. Would you like by title, approximate numbers?
Sure.
So I would say ADMs that I've crossed paths with. I actually did a search in my phone and I found 3.
Okay,
Director
which
Generals,
ones, please? Okay.
I'd have to go back and look, actually.
Okay, which departments, please?
They would have been people I've done work for.
Okay.
So it would have been PSPC.
Yep.
Actually, 2 of the 3 are retired.
Okay.
And as far as DGs go, it would have to be, I think I also found 8, again, projects that I had done in the past.
Okay, 8 individuals or 8 projects? Or 8 projects with those 3 ADMs?
So 3 projects with those 3 ADMs and 8 projects with DGs that I had contact with. But again, most of those have actually retired. I deal primarily with directors and managers.
Okay, directors and managers. And what would you say the nature of these relationships is that you have with these executives within the federal government?
So because I'm a business architect with change management and a skill set that focuses primarily on business process engineering, it has to do with government resource management. So HR, finance, how we work through reconnecting, if you will, or connecting and consolidating business processes.
But what would there ever be a time where you have more informal meetings, say over coffee, or no, never? Okay.
No, never. Primarily, primarily the work that I do is literally at the working level.
Okay. Moving on then from executives in the federal government, what connections do you have to current Liberal ministers and their staff?
Absolutely none.
Okay. Then how is it that you were able to connect with the Deputy Prime Minister's office?
Again, I thank you for the question. I never connected with the Deputy Minister's office.
Okay. Then why was it inferred in the media that you did?
Again, it was misquoted.
It was but did you say it? Are you saying what you said wasn't accurate, or you're
saying that it was a text taken out of context?
Okay. What was the what was the actual context of the text if it wasn't that?
The actual context used GEDS, the Government Electronic Directory Service, to identify people in roles that may look at the letter.
So you're saying you have no other connections with any other Liberal ministers. If we were to go through all of your communications, all right then.
I'm afraid that is our time,
okay,
Mrs. Kusi.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Sousa, over to you, please, for 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone since last year. Mr. Brendan, thank you for being here today and talking about what is accurate and what is misinformation. And from what you're telling us at the outset is that you haven't had any direct contact with ministers and or elected officials in regards to the work you do. Am I accurate in that?
Chair, thank you for the question. That's absolutely accurate. Thank you.
And as you know, the investigation that's proceeding is internal as well as with the RCMP regarding Bottler, not ArriveCAN. That's not under investigation. However, the consequences of some of what's being discussed in this committee brings caution in terms of how things are operating. We want to make certain that they're done appropriately. And of course, we take that very seriously. Have you been contacted by RCMP?
Chair, thank you for the question. Absolutely. No, I have not been contacted by RCMP nor any auditors.
Have you been contacted by any investigators in regards internally or any?
No, I have not.
Okay. And so the advice that you provided Bottler, you said a little bit at the outset of having some discussions, and I think their goal is to expand their pilot program to government departments. I mean, they came to be because Bottler didn't have. So explain to us how that came to be. Like, what it was the advice that you were providing for them.
So, Chair, thank you for the question. I was introduced to Bottler through GC Strategies. My background is actually in business process reengineering. So I was engaged, again, I'll pull up the exact, to provide advisory, research, and document compilation and report writing to Bottler. As far as whatever it is business they signed, I don't know if it's a pilot project, a proof of concept, or a feasibility study. I've heard 3.
Yeah, and I wanted to expand upon that because there was no contract, from what I understand. Or did you understand that? Did you understand that they had a contract or did not have a contract with government?
I understood that Bottler and GC Strategies was working with CBSA.
And so was your impression that they had a contract at that point?
Thank you for the question. Yes.
And so you're providing advisory work to Bottler to do an application to write
their business. Yes. So they are in the space of looking at proactive managing harassment in the workplace.
So was there a directive that they received from government to do this? Like, how did you premise it, or did you just hear from them as to what you needed to do?
I heard from them. Again, I signed a small contract with Bottler to provide them consulting services.
But I'm trying to understand, because to your point, we have some misinformation as to what they were there to do. What was their role with government? Because we're hearing conflicting issues on that too, that they put forward a huge, let's call it a Cadillac, when they were only looking for a tricycle. Like a lot of work was done, but not asked. Like, do you understand how that came to be?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I can't comment because I don't know the business that Bottler. You could have to ask Bottler directly.
Fair enough. your clients, your business. So you have dealt with GC Strategies in the past. So you were approached by GC?
Yes. So in my world, in my business of consulting services, I work with what I call tier ones, which are the big solution firms, the Deloittes, the PricewaterhouseCoopers. They use me to round out the solution set or skill set of their solutions team. Or I go to a tier two, and those are companies like GC Strategies that will contact me when they feel that there's an opportunity that fits my skill set.
In your advisory role with this particular project, did you have any discussions with other contractors? Because GC Strategies and bottlers weren't the ones that were contracted here. They were subcontractors.
Okay. Yeah, no, I did not.
So that was your only point of contact was with GC Strategies and then Bottler directly.
Well, Bottler primarily because I was contracted to Bottler, but I was not contracted through GC Strategies. I was contracted directly with Bottler.
With Bottler. Fair enough. So your contribution to this project was at one point, and your bill was $2,000 plus.
Yes, my contribution wasn't specifically to the project. It was specifically to help them understand, if you will, how the business so information architecture, very specific to what data and artificial intelligence is trying to map to. Treasury Board has a number of directives, if you will, and strategies that they would like everybody to follow. So purposefully, my role was to help Bottler understand what those strategies were from Treasury Board, whether they're IMIT, security, or data strategies. There was actually something in the works, I won't get into detail, but the Treasury Board was working on for AI.
So you're never really, are you contacted directly by Treasury Board or any ministries to do work? Or is it always through a contractor?
It's always through I call them my paper. I put, they're the contracting vehicle for me.
You mean the Deloittes and so forth?
Yes.
Yeah, that is our time, gentlemen. Thanks very much, Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the delay. Mr. Brennan, good afternoon. Colleagues, Happy New Year. Mr. Brennan, Kilav Consulting was registered in the lobbying registry. You said that you are not a lobbyist, but is the company registered on the lobby?
Merci pour votre question.
I'm not registered in the lobby. That is not my business.
Parfait.
Perfect. Thank you. Just as my colleague Mr. Sousa said, this study is not looking at the contract with Bottler AI or at GC Strategies, but we are focused on ArriveCAN, and that's it. The situation with Bottler AI revealed a practice that was done by the Government of Canada that raises concerns on a number of subjects: overbilling, multiple middlemen, companies and intermediaries, and other mechanisms regarding expense oversight, and especially results in this regard. You are involved in a number of these fields. What could the Government of Canada do to improve the contracting activities with regard to AI and tech markets, despite the high number of intermediaries and problems associated with overbilling?
Chair, thank you for the question. From an industry perspective, I hazard to go there only because I'm not an expert. I'm still doing a data science course. From a Government of Canada perspective, I have to comment and again give kudos to the Treasury Board for stepping up and starting to address the AI and the AI space. It does pose a lot of opportunities for the federal government.
OK. Donc, ce que je comprends.
Okay, so if I understand correctly here, you cannot suggest any improvement whatsoever with regard to the procedure, with the contracting procedures.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I misunderstood. Thank you for the clarification. To be candid with you, it is a space that I try to stay away from, and that's why I go through these other firms. It's actually quite a bit of overhead. for me. If I were to go and open my company and try to contract directly with the federal government, it would be considerably more overhead than I can manage while I tried to actually do consulting. So I have no suggestions because I purposefully stay away from it.
En fait, votre réponse est...
Your answer is reveals quite a bit of information here, because you say that when a company does business with the federal government, they have to fill out an application, and this results in important costs. From the point of view of a small business, it can be difficult to do so. I know that calls for proposals require 75 pages and dozens of pages of documents from businesses, so I understand. I thank you for confirming that. The situation with Bottler AI also revealed that the government's contracting procedures with Indigenous businesses can be circumvented by working with partially Indigenous-owned companies. I know that you are not directly dealing with the Government of Canada, that you deal with businesses. Nevertheless, with regard to procedures, you have some expertise with contracting, or rather with the above-mentioned procedures. How can the government ensure that the benefits are surfaced properly with regard to Indigenous businesses in Indigenous communities? Can your outside expertise clear up the air a bit?
Chair, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for this question in particular. As a consultant, again, I have no visibility to a company's bid and what they are. I'm one of many that would go into an RFP, if you will. If I could suggest that the resource bid is the resource hired. Often, or at least if a minimum that resource that is bid on that RFP, that they be offered the first right of refusal. I can give you so many examples of where my CV was used to win business, and I didn't find out weeks later that they had substituted either an employee or a colleague or another consultant or changed the terms and conditions. So I would absolutely ask, and I call it resource bid is resource hired. That way, at least the federal government would get the resource that they're looking for and the resource, the quality they're looking for, as well as what they're paid for.
C'est quand même assez intéressant.
It's all very interesting what you're saying here. It also reveals quite a lot about the purpose of this study. We are looking at resources that are being spent on a certain contract and that are not being spent on other contracts, and that nevertheless those resources have been allocated. If I understand what you're saying that you're not part of the task authorization process. You have not worked directly on the application, on the pilot project of the application, that is, with regard to sexual harassment. And you say that you do not personally know anyone whatsoever in the DPMO. And
Paula, you're out of time. Could you wrap up a quick question, please?
Oui. Donc, rapidement.
Quickly, what explains, or rather, how do you explain that some people are saying the exact opposite of what I've just said?
And for that, Mr. Brennan, I'm going to ask you either provide it in writing or perhaps Ms. Vignola's next round, you can answer that. Mr. Johns for 6 minutes, please.
Well, again, Happy New Year to everybody on the committee. Nice to see you all. Mr. Brennan, can you talk about what your relationship is with Mr. Christian Firth?
Chair, thank you for the question. Purely professional. He calls me when he has opportunities that might fit my skill set.
Okay, what did you mentor him in?
I never mentored Christian Firth.
Okay. Have you ever made statements that, quote, I am loyal to Christian?
Not to my knowledge, no. I have, with the Tier 2 community, I have several relationships or business relationships.
Okay. In terms
actually, let me recant. I can tell you that when I was approached by Bottler to go direct, I asked Bottler to have a conversation with GC Strategies because Christian introduced me. So that would be the only way I would have ever mentioned I am loyal, but I'm not loyal business wise. It's a way that he introduced me. I don't know what the relationship was with Bottler at the time.
Okay. Have you ever worked on one government project and invoiced for that work on another government project?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Absolutely not.
Similar work?
Absolutely not.
Have you ever double invoiced for the same work?
I absolutely have not.
Okay, so I'm just going to quote some excerpts from a call from Mr. Firth on January 26, 2021, regarding yourself. Mr. Firth states, quote, Vaughn's got paid well to be able to do this. So it's like, gives them an opportunity to double dip, right? End quote. Do you want to comment on that?
I thank Chair. Thank you for the question. I can't comment on third parties. I can't comment on his quote.
Why would he say that? Like, why would he say something like that?
That would be his business opinion.
Okay, but do you find that somewhat suspicious and pretty alarming, being that he's quoting yourself? He's talking about you.
Again, I can't comment.
Okay. All right. Were you named on the Bottler task authorization 2021002043?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, I was not.
Okay. So under which contractual agreement or task authorization did you reach out to the CBSA's Vice President of Transformation?
I did not reach out to the Vice President of CBSA's Transformation.
Okay, so here's another excerpt from an email from Mr. Brennan from yourself on March 9th, 2021. It says, quote, just a heads up in that I've reached out to a group under the Transformational Vice President in organizational culture and change management to get their feedback and any possible insights. Then later it states, I'm working with the Change Management Office with a colleague to set up a meeting with the Culture Office, end quote. Maybe you can speak to that.
Absolutely. That was the first task authorization that I mentioned, which was for the inventory of transformation projects. I was already on that contract.
Okay. So what was the nature of your relationship with the former Deputy Minister, Mr. Azowski?
None.
None?
No. I never communicated. I never got to communicate.
Have you ever transferred internal government information or communications to third parties who are not the intended recipients?
You would have to clarify. I don't understand.
Okay, I will. So on March 25th, 2021, you forwarded an internal CBSA email from the president to Bottler and Firth. The excerpt from the email, it's with, quote, it's with mixed emotions that we announced the departure of Pat Boucher, Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer from the agency. Pat's last day at the agency will be April 19th, 2021. Genevieve Bennett, the Director General of Enterprise Transformation at CTLB, will be assuming his responsibilities on an interim basis. We know we can count on your full support for Genevieve and CTBOB in this time of transformation. So was this not something that, in my original question about transferring internal government information or communications to third parties who are not the intended recipients?
It's a sharing of knowledge.
Okay, what's your involvement with the Department of National Defense?
I started my career inside of Lockheed way back when, but to be candid, when it came the last time I worked at National Defense, I believe it was 2016, okay. And it was on the defense renewal.
So who is your good friend from, General Jonathan Holbert Vance, the Chief of Defense Staff's office? Because there's an excerpt from an email from you on February 5th, 2021. It says, a good friend has been in the Vice's office for 18 years. Who are you referring to?
That person's retired.
Who is it?
It was a lady. It was the lady who was an executive assistant.
What's her name?
I can't recall her name, actually.
A good friend that's been in the Vice's office for 18 years. You can't remember who it is. You're under oath. I'm sorry, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
yeah, no,
Can you help here?
I think her first name is Joanne, but again,
Can you put that in writing to this committee? I believe that, you know, you're citing that it was a good friend in the Vice's office. You're being asked a direct question. Now you can barely remember the person's first name. It doesn't sound right. It sounds like a lot of witness testimony we've had at this committee where people just refuse to answer.
It's not that I'm
going to interrupt here, Mr. Brennan. Sorry, that is our time. Mr. Johns has a point, though. Would you be able to get back to the committee with the name of that person, please? We're going to go to Mr. Brock now for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan. A couple of loose threads that I want to continue discussing with you based on questions you've received from colleagues. I get the overall impression that you wish to distance yourself from any formal or informal relationship with Mr. Christian Firth, and I could probably understand your motivation to do that, given that he's testified twice at this committee. His credibility is certainly an issue. He's been caught in a number of lies, and he's under investigation by the RCMP. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, sir, to reflect on my comments as I ask you further questions about your relationship with Mr. Firth. But before I do that, I want to go back to the original Bill Curry article in the Globe and Mail from early October that really sets out towards the latter end of the article about your involvement in the Bottler controversy and scandal with the government. And specifically, the reporter reached out to you. You indicated to the reporter that your reference to having inside knowledge was a fabrication. You clarified that, and you said you fibbed, F-I-B-B-E-D, in an effort to put pressure on Ms. Dutt to take more action on the file. Now, we're all adults in the room. The last time I heard the word fibbed was in relation to my 5-year-old twins. They're 14 now, but they certainly don't use the word fibbed. I use the word lied. So do you admit, sir, that you definitely lied to Ms. Dutt to take so-called action on the file? Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, I did not lie. There were conversations, open conversations around the use of GEDs, and that is what I used to identify people inside of the DPMO.
I'm going to stop you right there. You said you didn't lie, but you used the word fibbed. What's your definition of fibbed?
Well, if they don't recall the conversation, then the interpretation would be that I fibbed.
So you're quoted as saying, I fibbed in an effort to put pressure on Ms. Dutt to take more action on the file. You are admitting this to Bill Curry, a reporter for the Globe and Mail. If that's not a definition of a lie, I don't know what is. What is your definition of fibbed? You'd have some great difficulty in this because you want to maintain your credibility, sir. But you've admitted to a reporter that you lied to your client, that you had a contractual relationship with.
We had marketing discussions based on hypothetical scenarios.
You deliberately lied to Ms. Dutt, a principal owner of Bottler AI, who had a contractual relationship with you to do a service on their behalf to make a connection with the government. And now you've now admitted to all of Canada, and certainly this committee, and to Bill Curry, that you deliberately lied to her. You wanted to exaggerate, correct?
Chair, thank you for the question. That's incorrect. Ms. Dutt was part of those conversations and well understood that we were doing, that it was a marketing effort and that we had several hypothetical scenarios given the workplace harassment management and GCAI adoption strategy were still evolving.
So did you lie to Bill Curry then by saying that you lied to Ms. Dutt? Is that a lie upon a lie?
It wasn't a lie upon a lie, sir. It was basically not trying
to get... It's your definition of fibbed. Okay, I'll take that. I don't know if Canadians will, but I'll accept that for the purposes of the time that I have. You then further respond to Bill Curry in an email and a follow-up phone call, and you quote, and you're quoted as saying, "I did not and do not have any contacts within the Liberal government, nor in the PCO." Now, setting aside the PCO, based on what I've heard so far for the past 1/2 hour, that statement, again, would be a lie, because you've already referenced a number of government officials. It's not just, as you put it, I deal directly with directors and managers. You've dealt directly with deputy ministers, assistant deputy ministers, if not ministers themselves. So why are you continuing to lie, sir, is the question I put to you.
And I have to cut you off there, Mr. Brock, and I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, you'll have to respond in Mr. Brock's next intervention. Mr. Jouari, welcome back. Happy New Year. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year to all my colleagues and all the staff. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to frame my questions to you over the next 5 minutes around three different pillars. Number one, I want to start with ArriveCAN, which is really the focus of this study. So a number of quick questions. Sir, did you ever work on ArriveCAN?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, I did not.
Okay. Did you have any type of discussion with GC Strategies or anybody at CBSA whatsoever that had anything to do with ArriveCAN?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, I did not.
Are you aware of any investigation ArriveCAN by RCMP, or have you been approached by RCMP as it relates to ArriveCAN?
Chair, thank you again for the question. No, I have not.
Okay, so nothing to do with ArriveCAN, which is really the focus of this committee right now under this study. So thank you for that. The next area that I want to focus is Butler AI. So your relationship with Butler AI, as you identify, was that you were hired on a separate contract by Butler AI to provide a consulting services for a period of, I think, from February 1st to, I believe you said
August 1st.
August 1st, for the total sum of $2,565.10. Can you briefly tell us what was the scope of that work?
Yeah, under the contract, I can't identify specifics, but I can say that, again, it was primarily for research, document compilation, and report writing.
Okay. So it is alleged that you boasted about your relationship to be able to secure a $2,565.10 contract. Can you comment on that, sir?
I can't comment. To your point, that would seem very ludicrous that I would do that.
Okay, so have you been contacted? Are you aware that there's an investigation by RCMP as well, an internal investigation by CBSA around Butler AI?
Again, Chair, thank you so much for the question. No, I am not aware of any RC. I've not been contacted by them or auditors.
Okay, so you've not been contacted by RCMP. You're not contacted by internal audit, anyone in there, and as you suggested, is at least the way you explained, the Butler AI $2,565.10 for some sort of consulting. There was somehow this urge to be able to boast about your relationship with ADM, which looks like was around 3 other projects. Okay, so let's go talk about the third and the final frame that I want to, or areas that I want to focus on, which was your responses to the media, and why media would frame something like this as that you have a relationship with somehow the Minister of Finance and to the deputy, and you prepared a letter and you have a relationship. Why would media do that?
Chair, thank you for the question. To be candid with you, I can't comment on why they would do that, but I can share with you that all of the conversations that I had with Bottler, specifically marketing discussions, were based on hypothetical scenarios. Those hypothetical scenarios, based on the fact that workplace harassment is quite a hot topic, and the fact that the federal government hasn't landed on an approach yet, neither has industry, quite candidly, with AI, that those conversations taped have all been taken out of context because, again, they were hypothetical and speculative conversations.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hoping that in the next round I may get a chance to explore that hypothetical scenarios. But did you ever draft a letter directly to the Minister of Finance or the Office of the Minister of Finance or the Deputy Finance Ministers or anybody in there? Did you personally draft a letter?
Chair, thank you for the question. I was asked by Bottler to draft a letter for Krista Freeland. That letter went from myself to GC Strategies to Bottler Executive when they submitted the letter.
Okay, so if your contract was with Bottler, what would you send it to GC Strategy?
I was directed to do so by Bottler Executive.
Okay, so by Bottler Executive, you're directed to draft a letter to send it to GC Strategies. Okay. Did you follow
that is,
up with
I'm
them?
sorry, Mr. Shari, that is our time.
Thank you. You're right, sir. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Vignola, please, for 2.5.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brennan, if I understand well, the contract with Bottler AI is exclusive to Bottler AI and you. Who put you in contact with Bottler AI?
Chair, thank you for the question. I was put in contact with Bottler AI through GC Strategies.
OK. Puis comment est-ce...
Understood. And how did GC Strategies present you to Bottler? How did they ensure that you were the right man for the job?
Chair, thank you for the question. GC Strategies introduced me to Bottler based on my business process reengineering background. I guess they felt it might be a good fit.
OK. Et Bottler AI...
Bottler AI, according to GC Strategies, needed your expertise with regard to processes restructuring, and that's why you were put into contact, right?
OK. Le sujet de la recherche que vous...
Can you tell us globally what the subject of this research was, what the topic was, generally speaking?
Chair, thank you for the question. Yes. If I may, the industry in and of itself, and primarily the Government of Canada, which is facing significant fines or having to fund, if you will, all kinds of harassment issues. And this is an opportunity, if you will, to proactively look at, and that was, I believe, what Bottler's value proposition is, to proactively look at managing harassment.
OK. Puis en ce sens...
Understood. And in that manner, your research was about compiling data on the number and of cases of harassment?
So my background is in business architecture. So the federal government follows several frameworks. I believe you have an IT background. Those frameworks data would have to match, as well as the infrastructure and all of the associated processes. And I was engaged to investigate how those processes could incorporate the proactive management of HR issues.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johns, for 2.5, please.
Well, thank you. Mr. Brennan, the reason I asked you about who your good friend is in the Chief of Defense's office is I want to find out some more information about sensitive information from D&D. Have you ever shared any sensitive information from D&D with outside parties?
If it was contracted to do so, yes.
Well, there's an excerpt from a call from Mr. First on January 26, 2021, regarding yourself. And Mr. First states, quote, he got that $5 billion use case pushed through. And then he also, at the same time as well, the stuff that he's done for D&D that he can tell us about is pretty huge. That I know a little bit about when he's had a few scotches and end quote. Can you speak about what this is related to and how you feel about this information being spoken to publicly?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I don't know how to respond to that. I can't comment because it's a third party comment that I can't comment to.
Okay, but have you ever shared information from D&D to outside parties?
No, unless I've been contracted to do so.
Okay. Have you ever reached out to government officials or officials on behalf of private companies who you did not have a contract with said department or officials?
No, I have not.
Okay, here's an quote, again, an excerpt from an email from yourself on February 5th, 2021. It says, quote, I also have calls into Health Canada, mental health, PSPC, PSCP, TBS, accessibility, Yasmin LaRoche, TBS, Privy Council regarding racism, coming together. This is shaping up to be a white paper, and we'll need to call content to be more succinct. But back to the fact, you're not on this contract. So why would you be reaching out to these officials if you're not on the contract?
So again, thank you for the question. Bottler, again, they're a small company. They contacted me over and over several times to look at what they could do. And I was helping them, and it was a lot of marketing discussions. And as soon as an email like that is sent, the strategy would change. So the marketing discussions are based on hypothetical scenarios, possible white papers, opportunities that may or may not arrive. And I can tell you specifically.
So you're doing this as a charity? Is that what you're saying?
Again, they're a small company starting up, and I was hoping to help them formulate. I'm not a marketing person. I'm specifically a business process engineering guy.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Mr. Brock, please, for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on our line of discussion regarding lies and fibs, excuse me, I want to clarify something that I'm not sure I understand what your position is. In relation to the email that ultimately went to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and her Chief of Staff Broadhurst, what was who brought the idea forward? Who was the genesis of creating this particular document?
Chair, thank you for the question. It would be Bottler, the Bottler executive.
Your evidence is Bottler approaches you. Bottler has zero, apart from working with Justice Canada on a previous project, has zero inside knowledge with respect to any government employee and a member of the government. And they say, I think this is a great idea, Mr. Brennan. What do you think? And can you help us draft it? Is that what I'm led to believe, sir, is how it started?
No, I can actually shed a little more information on that. Again, thank you for the question, Chair. If you remember, CBC actually published just around the Christmas time, if you will, a whole article, if you will, on what was happening in the Governor General's office. In the Governor General's office, Madame Payette, I believe, had a few issues.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. My time is limited. If you could just help me, you're steadfast that it was Bottler's idea, right? Not your idea and not Christian Firth. Am I correct? Or no, sir? That's a yes.
Today, my idea was specifically to look at...
I'm looking at an email, sir, thank you. I'm looking at an email from your company. You're the owner and director of TLAV Consulting Limited. Email dated January 25th, 21 at 4:33 p.m. to Christian Firth. Subject, following up on Privy Council opportunity. Doesn't say just picked up an idea or a thought from Bottler. It says following up on Privy Council opportunity. Christian, to our conversation this afternoon, I've pulled together research and a suggested path over the past 3 to 4 days to compile a deputy minister level email illustrating what I feel is pertinent to the value Bottler AI can provide. And you identify the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister, Government of Canada, and you include a draft letter. The only thing that was missing in the draft is details with respect to Ritika Dutt's phone number. So this, sir, did not come from Bottler, did not come from Ritika Dutt, did not come from Mr. Morv. It came from you. You did the research. You reached out to Christian. You worked on this over 3 to 4 days. And then I've got a series of emails back and forth between you and Bottler, and having Bottler make some suggested changes to the email, and you providing, sir, with the email address of Chrystia Freeland and her deputy minister, or sorry, chief of staff. So do you want to reflect on what you told the committee earlier, sir? Are you prepared to admit now that this was your idea, you thought of it, you cleaned it up, and you provided all the details to Bottler to send this email directly out to one of your government contacts in the Privy Council office?
Chair, thank you for the question. Yes, at Bottler's direction. Thank you.
So ultimately, they have to give you direction, but you created the letter, did you not?
Based on Bottler's requirements and requestings, yes.
You drafted it. It went back and forth, and finally you and Bottler settled on a final version. You gave Bottler all the email details, and Bottler sent it off, correct?
So at Bottler's direction, yes, I provided a draft, if you will, and I also went into KEDS and pulled down an email address, yes.
Making progress now. Is that time? Unfortunately, thank you.
Mr. Pawlowski, please, for 5 minutes.
So I want to follow up on a question of Mr. Brock. So he said earlier, not this round, the round before, he said in the Bill Curry article in the Globe and Mail, which I looked for but couldn't find, he quotes you as saying, I did not and do not have contacts in the Liberal government. Then, this is Mr. Brock alleges, your comments today are not consistent with that. Now, if I heard you right, you said on your phone you looked and you had 3 ADMs, 2 of them who are no longer in government. And I mean, I don't see that as inconsistent with your statement that you don't have contacts with the Liberal government. ADMs are members of the bureaucracy. They're not associated with the Liberal Party or elected members, or am I wrong with that? I just want to clarify that.
So, Chair, thank you for the question. Your clarification is correct. I do not have any of those relations.
Okay, now Mr. Johns had mentioned someone within defense, but again, that's not someone who's associated with the elected party?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, this was an administrator, an executive assistant, if you will, somebody who had spent their career at National Defense. Wonderful person.
Well, I
can't remember her name right now because she's the mother of a friend of mine.
I can't see any smoking guns involving you, but I wanted to ask you, because you described yourself as a business architect and someone who looks at an expert in government resource management. So as far as I can see, one of the accusations from the opposition with respect to this whole matter is this contractual kind of chain of command where CBSA contracted with GC Strategies, who in turn contracted with Bottler AI, who in turn had contracting with you. And one of the accusations was with GC Strategies, the initial contractor who subcontracts, and they get so much money for basically doing what? And that's the accusation that this is kind of a really inefficient system, that they take money for basically doing nothing. And certainly we've had some response from various people that say, no, that's not the case. You mentioned yourself the difficulty of contracting with governments per se and the amount of time it takes. Can you just lay out for the Canadian public what you think the value added from companies like GC Strategies, who in turn subcontracts? Is this a big waste of our taxpayer money?
So, if I may, thank you for the question, Chair. In order for me as a consultant with my expertise to take all of the courses I have to take to stay current and certified, if you will, along with the fact that I actually need to go and deliver on projects to say that I've done these projects before, I don't have the time to actually do a lot of the administration, if you will, to go out and do the sales and marketing and actually manage all of the security and manage all of the other components, if you will. So I do use tier 1 and tier 2 companies for that. They literally come to me when they need my skill set. So there is a huge advantage. Examples, I've submitted CVs on RFPs that are over 78 pages long. And the reason they're that long is that I actually have to go and map my expertise to that requirement in order to get points. So even doing an RFP is well over 70 hours of work, which is, almost 2 full weeks of not working when I could be actually making money.
Now, why doesn't the government just contract with you directly rather than going through, and why doesn't the government have within the government the people that then do what GC Strategies does basically, and then asks you down the line? Would that not be a saving of money and more efficient system?
I'm not an expert in that space, but I can tell you that there aren't a lot of me's out there, and for them to use me, pay for my fees, and then when I'm done, move on, to carry that individual and that skill set is a significant amount of overhead.
Now, maybe you can just tell me how has this affected you, all these allegations, both personally and with the family?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. I actually have switched to private sector consulting. It's very hard to do business with the federal government, and then when you actually have this kind of scrutiny, I've basically lost my business in the federal government.
Thank you very much. Mr. Genuis for 5, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brennan, just for background, did you previously work for the Government of Canada?
Chair, thank you for the question. No, I have not.
Okay. Thank you. There's a text message that's quoted in the Globe and Mail article that is you, purportedly you, saying with respect to the letter you're sending that was sent to the Deputy Prime Minister's office, they are trying to find a home for this opportunity, and there is internal negotiations as to how best to position. Can you confirm that you sent that text?
Chair, thank you for the question. Yes, I did send that text.
Okay. Was that text an embellishment, or was it an accurate description of your knowledge of what was happening inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office?
Chair, thank you for the question. It wasn't an embellishment as much as it was a hypothetical using the Government Electronic Directory Services, which is an org chart, if you will, to identify possible and speculate possible people who may or may not be trying to find a home for them.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what that means at all. Like you sent a text which implies that you have some knowledge about a conversation going on inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office, that the conversation is about trying to find a home for this opportunity. Did you know that they were trying to find a home for this opportunity and that there were internal negotiations going on? Because clearly you can't infer from looking at GEDS whether or not there are internal negotiations going on. So maybe try just try answering that again. Like, did you?
Sure.
Is it true, or did you know that there were internal negotiations going on around this, or were you guessing?
Thank you. No, absolutely guessing. I did not.
Okay, sir. I think just following on Mr. Brock's comments, like the problem is that you seem to have a different definition of lying than everybody else does. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, right? But you sent a text saying they are trying to find a home for this opportunity, and there is internal negotiations as to how best to position. And now you're telling us you didn't know that to be true, but you wrote that in a text message as a guess about something that might be true. You said something that you didn't know to be true as a guess. How is that not a lie?
Chair, thank you for the question. It's absolutely not a lie. It's a hypothetical scenario.
Okay, so like, why were you?
Sorry.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Right? Like, because the people who received the text clearly thought that you were saying something true, but you were describing a hypothetical that could have been.
So,
Explain this more to me.
Absolutely. It was a text. It was a real quick, hey, hypothetical. This is my guess of what's going on. End of story.
Was there any context around this text that we're missing that would have explained that? Or did you just say they are trying to find a home for this opportunity and there is internal negotiations as to how to best to position?
Again, hypothetical. I have no idea.
Okay. So you had absolutely no idea what was happening inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office, allegedly.
Absolutely. Chair, thanks for the question. Absolutely no idea.
Okay. Sir, I have to say, just with respect to this investigation in general, our goal is at this committee is just to find out what actually happened. It's to get to the truth. And people with nothing to hide should be able to give us frank and clear answers. But what makes me, and I think many members of the public, even more suspicious about what's gone on in the context of this procurement is that we have witnesses give obviously absurd answers. Like to Mr. Brock's question, you couldn't distinguish. You had said you fibbed about something, and then you said it wasn't a lie. And then here you're telling me that you did send a text. That the text you sent claims to have explicit knowledge of what happened inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office. You're saying you didn't have that knowledge that you claimed to. And now you're saying, well, it was because you were describing a hypothetical scenario. Like you weren't engaged in some kind of cosplay game. You were telling your client what you claimed to know was happening, and you're telling us you didn't know was happening.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is our time.
How am I to make sense of it?
Yeah, that is our time, Mr. Genuis. Perhaps we can get back on the next round. Mr. Saray, welcome to Ogo. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll yield my time to Mr. Sousa, please.
Mr. Sousa, you have 4 minutes and 52 seconds.
Thank you. Can you explain, Mr. Brennan, when you talk about writing a letter and submitting what you did, is that not why you were hired?
So, Chair, thank you very much for the question. I was specifically hired for my business architecture background. They needed help in other scenarios, and I stepped in to help.
So what you build them for by the hour or by a completion of a job?
By the day. So there's a number of activities that I would do in a day, and then I would provide deliverables, whether it be an advisory note or research, if you will, an update, industry insights, standards, compiled documents, where areas of the federal government that might fit with what they're looking to do. Again, consistently providing possibilities that would help them with their strategy.
Fair enough. And so when you produce the letter addressed to a department, and when you make references to phone numbers that are publicly available, you are offering them something that they're asking for.
Chair, thank you for the question. Absolutely.
Like, I'm trying to determine what untoward activity occurred here, other than you trying to provide an opportunity for this company to get a job because they're looking to promote themselves, and you are facilitating that promotion. Is that correct?
Chair, yes. Thank you very much for the question. Yes, with the best of intentions for $2,565.
Mr. Brandon, how long have you been at this job? How long have you been acting?
As a business consultant, I packaged at a large firm. So I actually opened my doors and started working. My very first contract with the federal government was in late 2004.
And who was the government in power?
Can you tell me who did the economic review? I don't know, to be candid.
I guess my point being is you've worked under different government parties.
Yes. Absolutely.
And throughout that period of time, you would have had relationships with, in your business practices, with a number of public servants.
Absolutely.
Did you ever have a personal relationship with a conservative minister?
Absolutely not.
Did you have any contacts with elected officials from other governments?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So that practice has been consistent, has it not? Or you tell me, has your practice been consistent in dealing with the civil service as opposed to elected officials in all parties?
Absolutely. I think if you went back 20 years, an auditor took a look, you would not see any invoicing for any kind of lobbying or any kind of that activity. It's very specific to business process or engineering, and that type of consulting.
So I guess some allegations, and that's what this is. And, you know, I mean, we don't want to jump to conclusions, which I think is being done at times, that you have had to do the job on behalf of Bottler, who doesn't have a contract with the government, and nor does GC Strategies, by the way, in this instance. It wasn't them that had the contract either. They're both subcontracting without contracts themselves within the system. So it's all very convoluted, and they're all trying to aspire to obtain something from government. And that was where they came to you for advice?
No, specifically Bottler came to me for advice to understand how the federal government, specifically inside of Treasury Board, they have several plans and priorities. And in those plans and priorities, they identify what are the plans and priorities in information management and technology, security services. What are the plans and priorities for the finances? What are the plans and priorities for HR applications? So I work in the resource management space.
Right. So you have familiarity there from many years of experience, from what I understand, from various political stripes. And that is where you offer value to them. So when you said you fibbed, what did you actually fib about? Because you do seem to have an understanding of the system that you can provide direction. That's why they've hired you. Is that correct?
So absolutely, that's the reason they hired me.
So what did you fib about?
So I guess it was making a perception of what somebody was saying about my text. And that was that they were actually in the meeting with me. And if they didn't recall, then their perception would be that I fibbed. And I did not. We were all in that meeting together, and we used the government electronic directory services to identify people.
And then you've done this for many companies subsequently over
years. No,
I'm afraid that is our time. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brennan, if I understand properly here, you have never tabled any contracts with the government. You have always been contracted by somebody else who had received a contract from the government. Is that the case?
Yes, that is the case.
OK.
In your opening remarks, you said that $500 million were spent to create Shared Services Canada. You mentioned that you were a consultant. You were not the one who got that contract. Is that so?
Chair, thank you for the question. A very quick qualification. In 2003, the Economic Review Committee put in place 100 CIOs to identify shared services. They came up with a $6.3 billion spend from the federal government. In 2005, they created a group inside of PSPC, and they broke out that $6.3 million into 3 different areas. The contract that I worked on was with one of those solutions companies inside of Public Works. So it was actually a $6.3 billion solution, which they broke out into data center services. They broke into telecom and networking services. And my specific piece, my 1/3, was specific to desktop hardware, software, and social and services.
Merci.
Thank you. Earlier, you said something to my colleague. You said, and I'm summarizing here, that if the government had the resource to play the role that GC Strategies is playing, which is a headhunting role, it would not be profitable. GC Strategies received $9 million for its headhunting role. How many officials in Canada make $9 million for work that only lasts a few months?
Chair, thank you for the question. Good point. I'm speaking about maybe the overhead to carry someone of my skill set, but yeah, good point.
And we're done with your time. Mr. Johns, please, for 2.5.
Mr. Brennan, last round you said Bottler contacted you repeatedly. By what method did they contact you?
They were, well, during the relationship, if you will, that we had from 2019 through to probably June, if you will, of 2021. We used email, we used voicemail, we used telephone.
Okay, can you provide us with records of all of those contacts and information back and forth?
Unfortunately, I cannot. I'm under an NDA, if you will, in contract with Bottler. They will have provided them for you.
Okay, you sent a text to Bottler on February 1st, 2021, and it says, quote, the Deputy Prime Minister's office reached out to Justice and CBSA. Contact was not able to offer context, but be ready for questions if asked, end quote. Who is your contact in the Deputy Prime Minister's office?
Again, another speculative and hypothetical scenario. I do not have any contacts.
Why would you write that then?
Again, we had several marketing discussions back and forth, and those are they're all based on hypothetical and speculative conversations, and they're texts, to your point.
Well, it says that they reached out. You wrote that.
Absolutely hypothetical.
Okay. And now, under what contract or task authorization were you doing this work? And under what contract or task authorization were you being compensated for this work?
For which work?
Reaching out in terms of your text to Bottler and what I just talked about at the Deputy Prime Minister's office.
I was not under any task authorization. I was not under any contract.
Okay. Have you ever engaged in or attempted to engage in unregistered lobbying activities?
No, I have not.
Okay, so some of the work that you've mentioned today, which you say you are doing effectively pro bono, it sounds like lobbying to me. Can you please tell us if you'd been getting paid for any of that work, and would any of it have been considered lobbying?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. Absolutely not.
So my understanding is that Bottler, you actually came via Mr. Firth, isn't that correct, to Bottler?
In 2019, yes, Mr. Firth introduced me to Bottler.
Okay, that is our time. You'll have one last round, Mr. Johns. Mr. Casey, welcome back to Ogo. I think last time we saw you at Ogo was about 8 years ago at the Canada Post study. Go ahead. Mr. Casey?
I believe this is the CPC round.
Yes, because I'm brand new at this. I apologize, Mr. Casey. Mrs. Kusi, go ahead, please. Thanks, Mr. Jawari. Mrs. Kusi, you're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Brennan, you say you have been in business for 25 years, yet Telelab has only been around for 5. What other company names have you operated under, please?
So, Chair, thank you for the question. I've been in business for over 20 years, around 20 years, not 25. Previous to that, I was a sole proprietor under my own name.
Okay, so under your own name. And did you have any contracts with the Government of Canada during those 15 years prior to your current company?
Not directly, no.
Okay. How many contracts, again, can you clarify, please, have you had with the Government of Canada?
I'd have to look up those records, but I'd have to say in excess of 15.
Okay, across how many departments, please?
I'd have to take a look again, but I believe about 5 or 6.
Okay. Would you be able to provide that information to the committee, please?
I could.
Okay, thank you very much. How many times have you partnered with GC Strategies, please? How many contracts have you done with GC Strategies?
I believe I've done about 5 or 6 again, but I'd have to get you those records.
Okay, and how many times have you partnered with Mr. Firth specifically, please?
None, 0.
Okay, none, 0. Okay. How would you describe the nature of your TLAV, please?
The nature of
your consulting business. What value do you bring your clients?
So I provide industry best practices, business architecture, change management, organizational design, and provide business and IMIT transformations.
Okay. Why would you say you are not a registered lobbyist when you are directly coaching businesses on how to pitch their products to government officials and members of parliament?
Again, my understanding and specifics around lobbyist is I've never set up meetings. I don't make those calls. I don't connect. What I bring is the industry standards expertise, if you will. I'm certified in several different architecture formats, or as well as provide where the federal government is going. Worked on a lot of that at Treasury Board, if you will. So I understand what it is they need. If I'm a resource management, that's HR, IT.
Okay, but the products that you are and the services that you are providing are for government, and you are interfacing with government. Don't you think those should be requirements to have you registered as a lobbyist?
Absolutely not. All of those standards are actually documented and on Treasury Board's website.
Okay, I disagree with your definition of a lobbyist. But I will leave it there. What were your payment expectations when working with Mr. Firth and Bottler AI to connect them with ministers and other officials?
There was no such arrangement, and yeah.
Okay. So then, how do you get compensated then if you're telling me there are no expectations when working with Mr. Firth and Bottler AI?
So again, I worked with Bottler AI directly, specifically under a contract. And then I've worked separately again with GC Strategies on other opportunities. I didn't work together with them. If Bottler had a relationship with GC Strategies, that was their relationship.
Okay, your business started in 2015, the same year that GC Strategies started. Did you start these businesses in tandem?
Sure, I think it's the question. No, they did not. I did not.
Okay, but you've been consulting with each other since that time.
I'd have to get you a start date. I'm not sure specifically when we started. It could have been earlier or later. I don't know.
Okay. Were you involved with Mr. Firth in the creation of ArriveCAN?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Did you ever have any communications with him relative to ArriveCAN?
No, I did not.
Okay. What percentage of your business is conducted through the federal government, would you say?
I'd say about 70%.
That's quite a high margin. And how often would you say you consult with federal departments, agencies, or liberal ministerial offices?
Never.
Never. Okay. Why did you have Ms. Ritika email Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, and more relevant here, her Chief of Staff, Jeremy Broadhurst?
I did not. That was a Bottler decision.
Okay, that was a Bottler decision, yet my both my colleagues, Mr. Brock and Mr. Jennis, I believe, have asked questions which indicate otherwise. The day after the email was sent, you had informed Ms. Ritika Dutt that the Liberal government was looking for a home for the Bottler opportunity. So who was your contact again that provided that information, please?
So again, hypothetical based on a text, and I do not have any of those contacts.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we will go to Ms. Latanzio for 5 minutes. Please go ahead and welcome to Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will yield my time to my colleague, Marcus.
Mr. Pawlowski, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to get back to the quote on I fibbed that was in the Globe and Mail. And my understanding was it was about your contacts in government and hearing back from them. Now, I've heard, I think, in this in this panel that you were talking about a hypothetical or it was a misquote. And can you just, or you were referring to GEDS? I'm just not, maybe I'm dense, but I'm just not clear, like the context of, did you say you fibbed and what were you talking about? Because that seems to be one of the main fingers being pointed at you. You said you're fibbed and now you're saying you're not, but I just want to clarify, like, what's that all about?
Chair, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to explain. There's conversations with Bottler and the team around using GEDS and identifying, if you will, the hierarchy within DPMO. That was how we came up with the names. That's how we had the discussions. When I was asked the question, I was told that they didn't recall that conversation. So then I said, my perception was would be that they fibbed.
So Bottler fibbed when they said that they didn't recall that there was that conversation.
Yeah, whoever it was, that they didn't recall.
Okay, it wasn't that you fibbed.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, it would look like I fibbed.
How would it look like you fibbed?
Well, if they didn't recall the conversation, it looked like I fibbed.
Okay, I see. Okay, and now you also mentioned an NDA you had with Bottler. I assume that's non-disclosure agreement. Is that kind of standard, and why in the industry, and why would that be there? Because I think the public perception is that if you have a non-disclosure agreement, you got something to hide. But maybe that's just the standard. Maybe you could explain that for me.
Yeah, so it is a standard in private sector. It usually focused on protecting their intellectual property and any conversations around it.
Okay, so I want to ask you something about the bureaucratic process, because you said your expertise is in business architecture, government resource management, and I'm a longtime doctor. I worked in a hospital for a long time. I was continuously frustrated by the bureaucracy and the fact that the bureaucracy seemed to be there to perpetuate the bureaucracy rather than to help us on the front line. Almost you talk to police officers, teachers, they all feel the same way. And certainly I think the perception in the government, and when we talk to you, there's this big spider web of consultants. And so you were paid as a consultant for Bottler, who were subcontracted by GC Strategies, who contracted CBSA. This is consultants on consultants consulting to consultants who consult to other consultants. And it's all about, like, we're all going to meet to decide when the next meeting is. And this is all like a big misuse of government money. That's been my perception. And it's not just our government. I'm sure the conservative government, the bureaucracy was there. The provinces, municipalities, they have their bureaucracies, the hospital, everyone has their bureaucracies. Can you explain to me, who's a bit of a doubter on bureaucracies, like what efficiency, why do we have all this? Do we really need it? Are we just paying people for spinning the wheels?
Thank you for the question. I honestly don't know how to answer the question. I was contracted directly by Bottler as a private sector enterprise, so it had nothing to do with the project. I was actually hired by Bottler to help them with their business.
Now, why does Bottler hire you, or what's your expertise that you've just been doing this for a longer time? You know the way government works.
No, my expertise is specific to, well, yes and no. So my expertise is specific to how the Treasury Board guidelines and plans, if you will, as well as the fact that I also have a significant amount of private sector understanding as well to help them with their business.
So that's why Bottler wanted you to write them the letter, which would go to finance, because you have the kind of the knowledge of how things work.
So no, writing that letter is really outside of my skill set. That's a marketing activity for the most part. What they were hiring me to do was understand how their AI, how the data would connect, or hire me to help them understand how that would connect to standard federal government practices.
Sorry, their AI?
artificial intelligence. They're a data company. So that was the value of what they were trying to provide the federal government, is a proactive way to manage issues, if you will, harassment issues, and that they would capture that data and meter, measure, manage it, if you will, so they could proactively manage harassment. That was the understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Mr. Brock, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Mr. Brennan, earlier you responded to a question of Mr. Johns that you've never double dipped. You still stand by that, sir?
I do, yes, thank you.
I believe you also indicated what you originally billed Bottler was something in the $2,000 range. Is that correct?
Pardon, you broke up on me?
I understand you indicated in evidence earlier that you billed Bottler something in the neighborhood of $2,000 for your work?
Sure, yeah. Yes, correct.
Forward a copy of that invoice directly to committee?
I can.
Now, why, sir, do I have another invoice with respect to your work on Bottler dated March 23rd, 2023, addressed to Christian Firth at GC Strategies for work involving your consulting with the government and Bottler. And the amount, sir, is $12,825.50.
So if I can provide context,
sir,
for
were
that?
you paid that amount?
I absolutely was not.
You were not? Okay. Why did you prepare an invoice for almost $13,000 for the same work that you invoiced Bottler at $2,000?
So the invoice was originally for Bottler. Their lawyer told me that it belonged to GC Strategies. I was led to believe that Bottler had gone bankrupt, and I threw that invoice on top of the pile.
And to inflate the value by 6 times the original amount.
It's not.
Fleecing the taxpayer, right, sir?
Absolutely not.
And you understand, sir, that Bottler has hours and hours of taped recordings. You understand that, sir? There is a quote, actually an audio recording that was taken between Bottler and Firth, where Mr. Firth says as follows: like this one guy, in reference to you, wrote the business case for shared services for $5 billion. If I give him to you free of charge, would you like him to have would you like to have him work with you? That was dated October 26, 2020. On the same call, Mr. Firth says, so I'll tell him, again referencing you, Mr. Vaughn, to bill a few days here and there and then I'll charge it to CBSA. What is going on here, Mr. Brennan? Because the taxpayer has a right to know if they're being fleeced by you.
So
did you work free of charge? Did you work free of charge?
I can't comment on third-party conversations.
Side deal with Mr. Firth?
Absolutely not. I can't comment on third-party conversations.
Actually paid for your so-called consulting for Bottler AI to various government ministries. What were you actually paid, sir?
Absolutely. I can't comment on third-party comments. I don't understand your question. You're asking me what I was paid for.
Were you paid, sir, for your services? It's a simple question.
From?
Government.
From government for work that I did on the other
on the Bottler case.
I was paid by Bottler, nothing to do with federal government taxpayer money. I was paid by Bottler $2,500. Let me get that exact number again.
Send us the actual bill, okay? Now, why didn't you tell this committee that you're also employed as the sole director of Fairmeadow Crescent, another consulting business here in Ottawa?
I am not. I've never heard of Fairmeadow Crescent. That's an address.
Sorry, sir. I've got actually some evidence here that through the open government source, you're listed as the director, your name, Vaughn Brennan, with an address of 1889 Fairmeadow Crescent, Ottawa, Ontario.
Yeah, it's a mistype. I only have one company, Taylab Incorporated.
And that's still in operation?
It is.
All right. I'll yield my time to Mr. Genius.
You have time for about one quick question.
Mr. Brennan, what's your relationship with the company Absol?
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're going back to 2013. I worked with them in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Qatar.
Were you a director of that company?
I believe I was listed as a director, yes, but it was absolved shortly thereafter.
Was that speculative and hypecutical, or were
no,
you
it's,
actually
it's
a director?
actual.
Okay, I don't find this funny, but you know, can we request copies for this committee of your text message exchanges with Christian Firth? Could you provide those to the committee?
If I have them, I will.
Okay. Let's get those text messages going back 5 years, and let's get them to the committee within 48 hours. Are you agreeable to that, Mr. Brennan?
I don't know if I can do it in that time frame.
Okay. When can you get them to us?
Again, if I have them, I don't know if these stats the same. I went looking for text, and those texts of that number seems to have disappeared as well, because I went to look for the text that was you quoted, and I don't have it.
That's remarkable. Just, Mr. Chair, is there agreement from the committee to order the production of those text messages within a week?
Colleagues, can we agree for a week? And then, Mr. Firth, you can certainly get back to the clerk with what you have. If you have difficulty going past that time, you can let us know.
Thank you. So it's text messages within 5 years, and we will receive them as a committee within a week, just to make sure that's clear. Thank you.
Thanks, and that is our time. And we're going now to Mr. Sousa. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Brennan, we've been discussing three issues, it seems to me, in regards to your activity and some accusations made against you. One, that you've been lying in regards to certain issues in respect to the semantics of the word fibbing. The other one, most recently, by Mr. Brock, is that you've overcharged on issues that you've done. Can you, and the last one is around this notion of lobbying. We've discussed the issue of what happened with regards to the fib. Can you, for the benefit of this committee, explain the billing that you did with regards to Bottler?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I was contacted in February of last year by a law firm, and that law firm asked for significant pieces of information, which we're in discussions, if you will, of whether they are in the scope of the contract or not that I signed with Bottler. I said that I would go and do that work if they paid me for the time that I sat on meetings for Bottler, not for the federal government, meetings that I sat on for Bottler. If they paid me for those, that I would go and do that extra work. And that's where that invoice came from. So when I sent the invoice to their legal firm, they sent back saying, no, this belongs to GC Strategies. I was led to believe that they were no longer in business. And I just sent it back and threw it on the pile, thinking that it might be a GC, along with GC Strategies. I'll get paid for the work that they're asking me to do. I have not heard anything from them since.
So all you've been paid by Bottler, or in regards to this activity, was the $2,000+
Correct.
That's all you've received.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The third issue that's coming up is around lobbying. Do you know what lobbying is and the Canadian lobbying registration? Like, you're familiar with the term, you're familiar with the activity, the limitations, and the requirements. So can you explain to this committee why you're not a lobbyist? Just for the purposes of making it very clear what it is you do and what you don't do.
So I am actually a business process, as I said previously. I work in the business resource management, identifying, if you will, new business processes, consolidation, efficiencies, effectiveness of different processes. I do not set up meetings. I do not have high-level meetings with anybody, any elected officials, anybody in power. My business model is specific to my CV, and that's how I make my money. I don't even have those relationships. I don't have a Rolodex to even be conceived as a lobbyist.
So when you drafted a letter in regards to enabling Bottler to reach out, that was on behalf of Bottlers. Who signed that letter?
And again, I used gets because I don't know who's who in the zoo. It would have been the bottler executive signed that letter.
So they're the ones that actually wrote the letter, which you just helped draft. Is that correct?
Draft, yes.
So you're not lobbying, you're not receiving compensation for your contacts. You don't have contacts directly with elected officials or, in some cases, the bureaucrats, unless it's come as a result of the contract that you're performing.
Correct.
The 3 or 4 different that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
In terms of charging your billings in regards to this, if you double dipped, you'd only received $2,500. You did not receive additional monies.
And again, that was with Bottler, not even with the federal government.
Fair enough. And you are alleged to not be telling the truth here today because of a misquote or a quote in the paper.
A text.
Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 2.5.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Brennan. I'm not going to go back and follow up on the list that my colleague just mentioned, but we heard that there was this fib. In your opinion, does Mr. Firth have high-level contacts? In one of your conversations with Mr. Firth, did he speak about high-level contacts?
Chair, thank you for the question. I don't recall the conversation, and I can't comment on his relationships.
D'accord.
Understood. Is it possible that sometimes some people would say certain things or interpret certain things as other things? I don't know if you know about the tale of the frog that said it was a cow. This frog would said loud and clear that it knew everybody, and was not all that important at the end of the day. Do you know that if it's possible that this is the case right now in this situation?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
En termes plus communs, disons, je me...
Okay, let's put the fable aside. I know that this might be a francophone tale that not all English people know about, but let's say there's somebody who says things to make them look really good and really important in order to get a contract. And with this regard to this chatbot with sexual harassment, and now we're talking about something here, and is that thing related to the fact that somebody would have lauded their value?
So I apologize that I'm being very vague. I don't understand the question. So are you asking me if myself or Bottler inflated their
GC
knowledge?
strategies.
Oh, GC I can't comment. I don't know. He conducts his own business.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Johns, please, go ahead.
So, Mr. Brennan, you said it was Bottler who wanted you to write a value proposition to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. But on January 25th, 2021, you sent Christian Firth an email with a draft letter for Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. You said, quote, "To our conversation this afternoon, I pulled together research and a suggested path over the past 3 to 4 days, to compile a deputy minister level email illustrating what I feel is pertinent to the value Bottler AI can provide," end quote. So you and Christian had already discussed this, and no one from Bottler is even CC'd on this email. You sent it only to Christian. In fact, I don't think Bottler had ever seen this draft because their contact info, their phone number is still left blank. So I just really want to be clear here because you're under oath. Is it your testimony that Bottler asked you to draft a letter to Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland on their behalf?
Absolutely.
So I just also want to confirm, as you've said here, you did not receive any payment for doing this work on the Bottler project, including drafting this letter. Is that correct?
The work that I provided for them was not specific to this.
Okay, so hypothetically, if you had gotten paid for that draft, yeah, would that have been considered lobbying?
No.
You don't believe it's lobbying?
Absolutely not.
And now, had you been paid for that draft, would that have been considered lobbying?
Absolutely not. They asked me to draft a document. I'm actually contracted by them to document.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the question I asked you earlier, to table all correspondence with Bottler AI, and you cited an NDA. I'm going to put forward a motion right now to this committee that that we request a production of documents that go back 5 years, and that it be viewed in confidence only by the committee, because you're concerned about the confidential nature of it. And then we review whether that should be held in confidence. And so, Mr. Chair, I move that we request these documents.
Is everyone clear what Mr. Johns was looking for? He's looking for the documentations between Mr. Brennan and Bottler, I understand, but the intent is they will not be made public. They'll be viewed within the committee only, much as we've done with McKinsey and other documents in the past. Is that correct, Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Jouari?
Yeah, fundamentally, I don't have any issue with that. I would like to have it in writing in both official languages, and then I commit that our side will engage in that discussion. Traditionally, we haven't had any issue, but let's get it in. Let's get the wording, because we're requesting production of document, and we in general agree, but it just, when it comes to the wording, then when it comes to the result, is not what we're looking for. So I just want to get the wording, and as I said, in general, we haven't had any issue. Please have it in both official languages, and then distribute it, and I'll commit to have that conversation tomorrow when we are meeting.
Okay. Is that fine, Mr. Johns? We'll
Yes.
get it in writing,
Yeah,
and then we can discuss it tomorrow. Wonderful.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks, Mr. Jouari. We are now going to Mr. Genuis for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think at this point it's important to take stock of and summarize where we're at in this whole ArriveCAN scandal and series of hearings. There are a few things that we know as a committee. Number one, we know that $54 million were spent on an app and spent through a two-person company that did no IT work, that was given the contract and subcontracted all of it. And we know that the RCMP are investigating contractors that have a relationship to this project. We know that the procurement system is broken, and government members, Liberal members have testified to this on this committee. They've talked about the unwieldy and complicated nature of our procurement system, how we have had substantial growth in the public service, as well as substantial growth in spending on bureaucracy. So we have a bizarre procurement decision around ArriveCAN. We have a procurement system that is broken overall, that's leading to a proliferation of consultants hiring consultants who have never done better than they are doing right now. But we also know that this committee has been repeatedly lied to by various witnesses in response to various kinds of questions. Christian Firth contradicted himself terribly in the course of his own 2-hour testimony. We have a witness today, Mr. Brennan, who has told us that what he put in text messages previously was not true. So either he was stating untruths in text messages, or he is stating untruths to us as a committee. We further have Cameron President McDonald and Min Doan, two senior public servants, accusing each other of lying to this committee about who was responsible for the decision to procure ArriveCAN. So we have multiple instances of people lying or accusing each other of lying. In some cases, we don't know who it is, but we know one of them is lying. In the case of Mr. McDonald and Mr. Doan. And now we have just this week stories coming out about severe professional consequences against public servants who have testified at this committee. We have a story now that Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano have been incredibly suspended from the public service without pay in the middle of an ongoing investigation. So clearly this procurement decision and procurement overall has significant problems with it. But what I'm most struck by is the cover-up that we are seeing in the context of these hearings. It should be fairly easy for both public servants and consultants to appear before this committee and simply tell us the truth. It is not a stressful proposition to appear before a parliamentary committee if you simply plan to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But when we have people who say, for instance, that a text message they sent was speculative and hypothetical when it has every indication of stating direct knowledge of what happens inside government, then it raises other questions, just simply of why there is this ongoing multidimensional cover-up from both public servants and from consultants. And it makes me wonder if one of the reasons why people are so reluctant to be forthright and answer direct questions is because of the kind of reprisals that we've seen. When you have senior public servants who are a bit more forthright in the case of Mr. McDonald than others have been, who then see negative professional consequences after they've testified before this committee, it maybe elucidates why there has been a reluctance for people to come forward, but it also raises the question of what's behind all this. What is being covered up? What would we find out if we actually got the frank and honest and clear answers from public servants and consultants that we want? So let me propose, I think, what is more than speculative and hypothetical regarding Mr. Brennan's testimony. I think it's very likely that he does have a contact inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office, that what he said in his text messages was accurate, that he wasn't just making things up in repeated communications with other individuals and in text messages, but that he was telling the truth at those times. And now, for whatever reason, he is embarrassed about, reluctant to acknowledge that he had an intimate knowledge somehow of the workings of the Deputy Prime Minister's office, and so he is running away from the suggestion that he has any kind of contact or relations within government. It just doesn't make sense to me that somebody would say outright falsehoods in text messages and then dismiss those as it was just a text message. It was just a hypothetical scenario. He was making statements to other people that he worked with, making specific claims about the kinds of conversations that happened inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office. The only logical explanation for Mr. Brennan repeatedly making claims about having intimate knowledge about what was happening inside the Deputy Prime Minister's office is that he actually had such knowledge. So needless to say, this whole ArriveCAN affair stinks. It demonstrates the broken procurement system that exists under this government, but it makes me extremely curious, and I think will make the public extremely curious. What is being covered up? What would we find? What will we find when we can actually get to the bottom of what took place?
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. That is our time. Mr. Shawari, please, for 5 minutes to finish up for us, sir.
Wow, what a great clip that's going to be. Okay, Mr. Brennan, you, in a number of times, you talked about hypothetical and speculative scenarios that you're working on with Butler to help him, because you've already said you completed the work that you did for $2,565.10, and there were this goodwill that you're trying to help this company, and then you work on a number of hypothetical and speculative scenarios with them, and the draft of that email, however it or that letter to the minister office, however it found it, whether it's through Butler or with the direction from Butler to Mr. Fritz. Was there any expectation that as part of this work, if and when Butler AI solution has been licensed, has been rolled out, you would somehow be compensated, or you have some type of compensation as part of that, and that may be the reason that there was an invoice of $12,000 was sent to the lawyers as per your claim?
So thank you for the question, Chair. No, I'd actually discussed the opportunity to be part of the company when we first met with Butler, and that was not an option. The $12,000 invoice is literally to address extra work that they're asking me to do.
Okay, perfect. So can you now talk about the hypothetical and speculative? Can you explain to us for the next 2 minutes and 10 seconds about give me a scenario that you would use that the terminology for that's relevant to the work that you did for Butler.
Sure. So we could go right into what the architecture is and how it is that the federal government, how Butler could map to what the federal government might be looking at doing. So the federal government is looking at a data strategy and a data artificial intelligence strategy. Butler is an AI company. So what would be the scenarios, if you were in hypotheticals, of what the federal government might standardize on? The same way that federal government has a standard HR application. So how would they look at mapping their data to that HR application? What would be the hypotheticals? What would be the speculatives, if you will? The same way that any of those conversations we had and texts were all hypothetical and or speculative. So it's part of the marketing process. As you learn, you actually, okay, well, that's going to work. No, that's not going to work. Okay, well, that might work.
So you, my apology for interrupting. So you had an understanding of TBS Treasury Board strategy, specifically around AI, specifically around organizational structure, process re-engineering, because those guys are the one who set the guideline. You run into Butler AI, and they said they had an application that you felt, wow, okay, I really want to be part of this. And they said, no, but help us, we pay you. And you said, fine. And then you came back and said, hey, look, if you present the application, or if you consider these functionalities within this application is very much aligned with what the government might be looking for. And that's what you are. If my understanding is wrong, just tell me, no, I'm wrong. And I don't have any problem with that. So as it relates to the data, if you amend your solution like this, or if you enhance your solution like this, it's a better fit. If you incorporate this type of processes into your AI process around HR, it will be a better fit for that. And those are the hypothetical and speculative situation that you're talking about. Am I right to understand that?
Yes, that's actually part of it, as well as the conversations that we had. That apparently there's hundreds of them taped. A lot of those conversations were, again, speculative and or hypothetical, based on where the government is and where Butler was and where they would want to go.
So basically what you're trying to do, you're trying to help them align their development with where the government was going to go, so they would be successful in being able to launch that application or sell that application. Okay, so what you are talking about, hypothetical and speculative, is very much alignment of the future development, potential future development of a solution to fit the government's need.
Correct.
Okay, I only got about 7 seconds, which I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shorey. Unless anyone has anything else, we'll dismiss Mr. Brennan and adjourn. Oh, Mr. Sousa, go ahead.
Yeah, before we adjourn, I just wanted to confirm, are we doing in-camera tomorrow as requested by the president in that her letter?
No, it will be public meeting tomorrow.
So it's not in camera? Okay.
No, public. Wonderful. Colleagues, we are adjourned. Mr. Brennan. Yes, Mr. Genos?
Thank you. Could you give us just an update as well on the situation of request for Mr. Firth to appear
yeah,
before the
certainly.
status?
Mr. Firth and Mr. Anthony were summoned, and a second time to appear, and for a second time, they have stated the same reasoning behind the first one, and I think everyone received that letter, that they wish not to appear. So we'll have to discuss that at step forward at a future meeting. But a second summons was issued for them, and again, they are, I guess, refusing to appear for the same reasons as the first time. Identical reasonings. But I suspect we'll deal with that either tomorrow or when we're back January 29th, I think it is.
Yeah, Chair, the bottom line is these guys need to appear, right? So I think the committee's been clear about that, but if they're watching, I mean...
Yeah, the committee's been clear. Twice the committee's asked them to be summoned, and again, twice they've used the identical reasoning behind not appearing. So we'll have to discuss next steps either tomorrow or when we're back on January. I think we're sitting Mondays now. I think it's January 29th we're back, but we'll have to deal with it. All right. If nothing else, colleagues, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.